After my parents divorced, my sister chose to live with our wealthy dad. I moved into my mom's rented apartment. A few years later, Dad squandered his fortune on drinking and gambling. Meanwhile, Mom started a live streaming business and became a successful businesswoman. Then my sister's life took a downturn and she came crying to me. But when I wasn't paying attention, she tried to poison me. We have the same parents, so why do you get to live so well while I struggle? She complained. When I opened my eyes again, it was the day of my parents' divorce. This time, she rushed to hug our mom and said, "I want to live with Mom, no matter how hard it gets." Little did she know, Mom was more formidable than Dad. My sister had always been sweet-talking and charming, more favored than me. So when my parents decided to divorce, they asked her first who she wanted to live with. Dad was a trust fund kid, really wealthy. Mom was a homemaker with nothing after the divorce. So without hesitation, my sister hugged Dad. "I love you the most, Dad. I can't be without you. I want to grow up with you." Dad was overjoyed and lifted her up high. "Sweet girl, you can be Daddy's little princess forever." My sister smiled happily. And out of sight of our parents, she shot me a smug look. That's how she'd always been, competitive. She was willing to do anything just to beat me, even if it hurt her too. Dad and my sister laughed. Mom stood there looking heartbroken. I stayed silent for a while, then took Mom's hand. "Mom, I'm willing to live with you." She gave me a deep look but said nothing. A few years later, purely by chance, Mom's streaming business took off. We moved from her shabby apartment to a community, then to a villa. Her old electric bike was replaced first with a Mercedes, then a Porsche. One day, while Mom was driving us out, we came across a traffic accident. A scooter driver's wrong-way drive had hit a luxury car. The luxury car owner was yelling, while the scooter driver was apologizing profusely. His daughter was crying beside him, but he kicked her out of shame. The girl turned around in distress, and her eyes met mine through the car window. It was my sister, Becky. When I looked at the apologetic scooter driver, I realized it was my dad. Becky spotted us too and chased madly after our car. But Mom pressed the gas and drove off as if nothing happened. Hesitantly, I spoke, "Mom, that was my sister." Mom coldly replied, "I saw her." "What? Do you want to help her?" I didn't dare to make a sound. Mom snickered. She was so lovely as a child, but now she's grown ugly like her father. A heartless ingrate. That's karma. I stayed quiet. Not long after, Becky reached out to me. She wanted to meet. In a cafe she sobbed. "Sister, you have no idea, Dad." Becky said Dad was a complete fool. He was incompetent but greedy. A few years ago, he took bad advice from a friend and invested in a scam, losing millions. Grandpa was furious and kicked him out. I thought he'd learn from his mistakes, but all he did was drink and gamble. Once kicked out, he started partying every night and, encouraged by girlfriends, gambled at casinos, losing hundreds of thousands within months. He even racked up over $600,000 in gambling debts. Grandpa couldn't be bothered with him and cut him off financially. Dad was forced to deliver food for money, but he was used to a pampered life. He didn't even know traffic rules properly. Not long after starting deliveries, he hit a luxury car by driving the wrong way, the incident I saw that day. In the cafe, Becky cried in my arms. "Sister, I saw Mom driving a Porsche, wearing Chanel, and you had a Dior bag. You must be doing well." "Sister, could you talk to Mom? I'm also her daughter. I don't want to live with Dad anymore. I want to be with her. She must miss me." For years after we split, she kept calling, hoping I'd come back. Her eyes were full of hope, but thinking of Mom sent shivers down my spine. In the end, I said, "You shouldn't live with Mom, but I can give you some money." Becky looked up sharply, but quickly covered it with a grateful smile. "Thank you, sister. I knew you'd always be the best." The next day, I transferred $50,000 to Becky. She offered to cook me a meal at her place. In her rented apartment, Becky handed me a cup of tea. "Sister, I remember you liked jasmine tea as a kid. I picked this specially for you. Do you like it?" I drank it without suspicion. But soon, I felt dizzy. The last sight I had was Becky slashing my face with a knife. "Lillian, we're both our parents' kids. Why do you get to live a good life while I have to suffer? You're rich, but you only gave me a little and won't let me live with Mom. You're a selfish jerk." When the darkness passed, I opened my eyes to the day my parents divorced. Faced with Dad's question, Becky quickly clung to Mom. "I can't be without Mom. I'll live with her no matter how hard it gets." Mom tearfully hugged Becky. In her arms, Becky gave a cunning smile. From a place no one else could see, Becky mouthed silently to me, "Sister, this time, it's my turn to reach the top." So she was reborn too. But she didn't know that Mom is scarier than Dad. Becky joyfully headed to her new apartment, and I stayed at the villa. Dad, as usual, was irresponsible. He just got divorced and was already planning to hit the nightclub at night. On the phone, some lover's voice was sweet and sticky, but Dad was very amused, grabbed his jacket, and was ready to leave. As he was walking out, I stopped him. I asked, "Dad, who's having dinner with me?" He replied matter-of-factly, "Isn't the nanny there? Let her eat with you." I bit my lip and said, "I haven't seen Grandpa in a long time. I kind of miss him. Dad, can you take me to his place?" Dad hesitated for a moment. Seeing this, I added, "Cousin Charlie went to visit Grandpa the other day, and who knows what he said, but Grandpa bought Auntie another car. Did you know that, Dad?" Hearing that, Dad didn't hesitate at all. They just keep mooching off family. Ugh. "Lillian, I'll have the driver take you over right now. Make sure to speak well of Dad in front of Grandpa, got it?" Saying that, he loaded me into the car. Grandpa lived in a secluded lakeside villa. In his eyes, my mom was a scheming woman. She stopped at nothing to climb up to my dad, with deep and malicious thoughts. As a result, he always looked down on Mom, and didn't quite like Becky and me. In a past life, after Mom and Dad divorced, Becky also tried to please Grandpa. But at home, she was always the spoiled little princess. All she was good at was pretending to be obedient and innocent. But at Grandpa's place, none of her tricks worked. No matter how much she cried or fussed, all she got was Grandpa's indifference. In contrast, Auntie's son, Charlie, was Grandpa's beloved. Whatever he said or did, he always received Grandpa's praise. Over time, Becky grew resentful. At a family gathering once, she deliberately broke an antique vase and tried to blame it on Charlie. She thought that would bring Charlie down, but a hidden security camera caught it all. Charlie's status was intact. Becky, on the other hand, faced Grandpa's wrath. Grandpa accused her of being manipulative and ruthless, just like your mom, and told Dad not to bring her to the house anymore. From then on, Becky held a deep grudge against Grandpa. On Grandpa's birthday, Becky even posted a comic on social media. It was a vicious curse, showing death using various means to take an old man's life. Grandpa saw it, of course, but he ignored her. Later, when Dad went bankrupt, Becky's living conditions plummeted. That's when she finally thought of Grandpa, kneeling at the old house's gate, begging for forgiveness and shelter from him. Grandpa didn't even show up. The security guards dragged her away. This time has reversed. Becky was off chasing her dream life. And standing outside the lakeside villa, about to visit Grandpa, was me. I took a few deep breaths and rang the villa's doorbell. Even if Dad had already called Grandpa to say I wanted to visit him in the study, Grandpa still looked at me coldly. I greeted him politely, and he had no intention of acknowledging me. I wasn't upset, just found a corner to sit in. Living with Mom for those years, I had faced far worse humiliations. This was nothing. In the study, Grandpa was quizzing Charlie on his lessons. Charlie, 17, was a brilliant student, a genius interested in finance and economics. Grandpa was a self-made wealthy man, but unfortunately, his children weren't accomplished. So, he genuinely admired his proactive and grounded grandson, often bringing Charlie over to discuss famous business deals from home and abroad. The questions Grandpa asked were tough. Charlie answered the first few, but this one was challenging, leaving him thinking for a long time. Grandpa wasn't in a rush, patiently waiting for his answer. I timidly raised my hand. "Grandpa, can I share my opinion?" Grandpa glanced at me with skepticism. You haven't even graduated middle school, what could you say? If you're restless, go outside. No need for tricks. I wasn't angry at all, smiled, and said, "If my answer doesn't satisfy you, I'll go out and stand outside as punishment." "How about that?" Grandpa snorted. Charlie, however, said, "Grandpa, why not let little sis try?" Grandpa didn't speak, which meant he agreed. I gave Charlie a grateful smile, then spoke. This batch of entrepreneurs had an illegitimate source of initial funds. Early on, they helped foreign companies enter the domestic market as middlemen, exploiting information gaps for huge profits. Grandpa looked at me in surprise and continued asking, "Then what do you say is their natural advantage, and what's their problem?" I thought for a moment and replied, "They formed close ties with foreign companies early on and adapted quickly to the market, which is their advantage. But their problem is an over-reliance on the foreign company's first-mover advantage, lacking their own competitiveness. So, when the market becomes more regulated, their competitive edge fades too." Grandpa stared at me for a long moment, his expression complex. There was doubt, scrutiny, but no longer any contempt. After a while, he asked, "You're only 14. Where did you hear these things?" I said, "There are plenty of books in the city library. I love reading." But that wasn't true. Many of Mom's clients were beneficiaries of serving as middlemen for foreign enterprises. They exploited loopholes, using nepotism and information disparity to gain wealth, while attributing everything to their skills and competence. And on a drunken afternoon, embracing a young girl, couldn't wait to boast about past victories. Thinking of this, I forced my eyes shut. When I opened my eyes, I was still in Grandpa's serious and old-fashioned study, not the dim, pink-lit bedroom from before. It was Charlie who gently started clapping. He said, "Lillian is only 14, but she reads and thinks really well. That's impressive." He looked at me with a warm, sincere expression. "I feel inferior to you." I quickly shook my head. It was just luck. "I don't understand the financial and economic concepts you talked about. I've got a lot to learn." After a brief silence, Charlie asked, "Lillian, do you want to study with me?" With Charlie's suggestion, Grandpa allowed me to sit in on the classes. But he still had his doubts. He suspected it was just another way to swindle money from him. So he insisted that Charlie report my progress regularly. Honestly, Charlie didn't need to monitor me, nor did anyone need to push me. My daily routine of going to and from school, practicing piano on the weekends, or hanging out at the library was the life I always wanted. How could I not cherish it? Months flew by. In Grandpa's study, I was no longer just a listener. Often, Grandpa's questions would lead to heated debates between Charlie and me, so much so that Grandpa had to intervene. At some point, Grandpa stopped looking at me with suspicion. Charlie also stopped reporting to him about me, complaining that focusing on me had cost him some time and led to him losing a small test to me. Grandpa just laughed at that. I acted like I didn't know anything and just kept working on my exercises. At school, my hard work paid off. I won first prize in a math competition. The teacher said they'd acknowledge me at the parent-teacher meeting. But, as usual, Dad was unreliable. He promised to come, but half an hour before the meeting, he told me he couldn't make it. "Lillian," he said, "I've got an important meeting. I'll have the nanny attend for me. You behave." Yet, I could clearly hear laughter from women in the background. I didn't call him out on it and calmly hung up the phone. Then, I sent the award list from the classroom chalkboard to Grandpa. In the list, my and Charlie's names shone brilliantly as leaders of the middle and high school sections. Attached was a note, "Grandpa, Dad can't make it to the meeting, but the teacher really wants to talk about my future. Can you come?" Grandpa personally showed up to the school, a treatment even Charlie hadn't received. My homeroom teacher was anxious, and the principal rushed to greet him. Grandpa calmly sat in the principal's chair and asked, "How's my granddaughter's performance? Anything she could improve on?" It was a rhetorical question. The teacher rushed to say all sorts of good things, praising me as an excellent student. Satisfied, Grandpa nodded. After the meeting, he paused a moment, then instructed the driver to head to the mall. "I noticed the girls in your class dress quite lively. Why do you look so plain? Is your dad not treating you well?" he said. In the end, he got me 6 or 7 outfits and several bags. The numbers on the receipt gave me nerves. "Grandpa, aren't you worried I'm after your money now?" He laughed heartily. "I'd be worried if you weren't." I was startled, then laughed along. Becky thought to win Grandpa over with cuteness, flattering words, and acting coy. But she didn't understand. Grandpa, a self-made entrepreneur, had seen countless sugar-coated bullets and the dark side of human nature. He didn't need, or respect, praise and flattery from the incompetent. An aging leader like him wants to see vibrant successors. And all I have to do is keep proving myself, and eventually, I'll be another Charlie, Grandpa's pride and joy. Years later, Grandpa had a study specially renovated for Charlie and me. Just as we were playing Go, news came through. Dad had insisted, despite Grandpa's warnings, on investing tens of millions in a shell company. Now, it's blown up. From the neighboring study, I could hear Grandpa's angry roars even through the wall. "Do you have a tumor on your shoulders instead of a head? How many times did I tell you that company was no good? Why didn't you listen? Forget your explanations. From now on, you're no son of mine. Get out. I'll consider you dead." My heart sank. Just like in my previous life, Grandpa was going to disown Dad. I wasn't sure if this time he'd take it out on me too, and kick me out like he did with Becky. Bang, the study door flew open. Grandpa stood there, furious. "Lillian, come out." Charlie quickly stood up, blocking in front of me. "Grandpa, whatever Uncle did, Lillian is innocent." Grandpa replied coldly, "This has nothing to do with you." Charlie wanted to say more, but I tugged on his sleeve. "It's okay, brother. Grandpa must want to talk to me." Inside the solemn and old-fashioned study, the smell of tea lingered. I respectfully brewed the tea, served it, and placed the cup in front of Grandpa. Then, just like my first day here, I quietly sat in a corner. Grandpa studied me for a long moment, his aged eyes seemingly seeing through me. I remained still, letting him observe me. After a long silence, Grandpa spoke, "I plan to cut off ties with your father. What do you think?" I replied, "Dad made a big mistake by not listening. He should realize that." Grandpa asked, "You're not going to convince me otherwise?" I almost sighed. Why even bother trying to persuade? Last week when we talked about the rise and fall of a family-run business in America, I mentioned that if the family members aren't talented enough, the company should be handed over to a professional manager. You know better than me about Dad's abilities. If I tried to convince you to keep him around, I'd be betraying my conscience. Grandpa squinted his eyes and said, "If I kick him out, you'll have a tough time. Are you okay with that?" I chuckled helplessly. "The money's yours, you can give it to whoever you want. I have no say in it. As for me, whether it's tutoring or interning, I'll find a way to cover my tuition. Don't worry about me. Having a dad like that, it's just my fate and I don't blame it." After a long silence, the teapot started to boil again. I reached out to pour some water, but Grandpa poured a cup of tea for me himself. He looked into my eyes and said, "Having a dad like him is your fate. But in your life, there's more than just your dad, there's me." Grandpa kicked my dad out of the house, but he moved my luggage into his home. From then on, I had a room of my own in the lakeside villa. I no longer had to deal with the different women Dad brought home because I became Grandpa's granddaughter. Grandpa's protected granddaughter. One day, after school, I met an unexpected visitor, Becky. She was dressed in a seductive style, wearing all luxury brands. Her makeup was flawless, with long, fluttering false eyelashes that seemed to create a breeze. Becky looked me up and down, wrinkling her nose exaggeratedly. "I heard Dad went bankrupt. I just had to come and check on you." "I mean, come on, sis. Even if the family's out of money, you can't be dressing so shabby, right?" I glanced down at myself. My sneakers had split during basketball practice today, and I hadn't had a chance to change them. My clothes were just plain sportswear, slightly worn, but I liked them because they were comfy and loose. As for accessories, I wasn't like some girls in class who loved bracelets and necklaces. Bracelets slowed down my writing. Necklaces got in the way when I exercised. So the pile of jewelry Grandpa gave me was still untouched in the closet. Seeing my silence, Becky assumed I agreed with her. She leaned back, smiling smugly. "You're so pitiful, sis. Not like me. I already have 2 Hermes bags and a bunch of pretty dresses. I live like a princess every day." I didn't want to discuss it, so I asked, "I haven't seen you at school since last year. Did you transfer?" She replied, "School's pointless. Now I learn dance every day, and Mom helps me with makeup and skincare. She says girls don't need to know much. Beauty is the real deal." She leaned in, pointing at her eyes with pride. "See my double eyelids? Mom took me to get them done. Way better than your single eyelids, right? Look at my hands. I get full body treatments every week. Mom says they're as delicate as boneless jade. Yours though, full of calluses." I opened my hand, looking at my palm. Some calluses from writing, others from hitting the gym. Soft hands can't throw a punch. I wanted hands strong enough to take on life's challenges. Noticing my silence, Becky looked even more pleased. She said, "Jealous, huh? But don't think you can go back to Mom. She likes well-behaved daughters, not you." I laughed to myself. Yeah, Mom likes well-behaved daughters. Back then, I refused to bow down, and she beat me badly for it. Becky thought the makeup, short skirts, and designer bags from Mom were out of love. Little did she know, they were tickets to a living nightmare. Those pretty dresses would be torn apart. Those beautiful faces would get ruinously used. Amid the luxury and elegance, old men enjoyed hearing young girls beg for mercy. There's no such thing as a free lunch. My dear sister, you don't realize, the price of getting something for nothing is way higher than money. After graduating high school, I got into a top business school in the US, rejoining Charlie as a classmate. Grandpa was thrilled, throwing me a going-away party. Charlie even flew internationally just to celebrate with me. During the toasts, a middle-aged man in a suit tried flattering me. Truly a granddaughter of Nolan, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Of course, that saying wasn't exactly right, but everyone tactfully ignored the fact that my grandpa's apple was actually a useless and incompetent fool, who was, at that moment, miserably working to pay off his debts. I nodded with a smile, raising my glass to this man. The moment I saw him, a chill ran through me. He had a mole over his right eyebrow, a scar on his ear. Underneath his suit, an ugly birthmark on his chest. How did I know this? Because he'd been a regular at my mom's place. In the pink bathroom of the luxury villa, Peter's favorite pastime was grabbing my hair and holding me underwater in the bathtub, again and again. He said my suffocation brought him immense pleasure. He said my mom took money and still needed him for business. Even if he killed me, my mom wouldn't care. So it was better if I didn't resist. Better if I went along quietly. Otherwise, his whip would tear me apart. That face, I could never forget it. Seeing my reaction, Charlie took my glass, subtly covering for me. My sister can't handle her drink well, so I'll have it. Everyone applauded, praising Nolan's blessing and the sibling union of the Andreas family. Just Grandpa saw my discomfort and suggested I take a break in the lounge. In the lounge, I drank cold water, trying to calm down. Judging by the time, Mom should have shown her true colors by now. But Becky, what would she face? I took out my phone and called her. Hey, sis, how are you doing lately? On the other side of the video call, Becky looked at me dismissively. So, now that you've had a tough time with Dad, you think of me? Weren't you stubborn before? If you want to come back, you better beg me on your knees. I shook my head. No, I just wanted to see how you've been doing lately. Becky snickered. Oh my dear sister, playing nice now? You probably wish I was doing poorly, don't you? Too bad, I'm great. I'm in a relationship. My boyfriend's rich and powerful, treating me like a princess. And now, I'm practically a cornerstone at Mom's company, running a team of over 10 people. My dear sister, better take care of yourself, or you might end up delivering food with Dad. With that, Becky hung up. I stared at my phone, lost in thought. In my past life, after the divorce, Mom got some assets. But she was so used to living in luxury that she couldn't stand a frugal life. Soon enough, she went back to her old ways, trying to snag a rich guy again. But she was past her prime. Despite all her upkeep, she couldn't compete with young girls' beauty. After several failures, she realized that, while these men weren't interested in her anymore, they sure seemed interested in her daughter. That's when my nightmare began. Is Becky truly happy now? Or is it her last fantasy before a breakdown? 6 months later, I returned home. It was almost Grandpa's birthday. I grabbed Charlie to go gift shopping for Grandpa, and bumped into Becky at an auction. She was wearing a skin-tight cami dress with bright makeup, looking totally out of place. But when she saw me, she perked up. Lillian, what are you doing here? Can you even afford a place like this? She then glanced behind me. Charlie stood there in a silver gray shirt and black suit. His whole vibe was confident and stylish. Becky stared at him like she'd seen a ghost. Is that Charlie? Charlie nodded. It is. And you are? He didn't recognize Becky. Becky used to look a lot like me. But now she had eyelid surgery, a nose job, and a boob job. With her heavy makeup and flashy outfit, she was unrecognizable. It made sense Charlie wouldn't know her off the bat. But hearing Charlie's question, Becky went ballistic. Oh, great, you remember her but not me. How on earth are you two together? Dad's been bankrupt forever. How'd you get close to Charlie? Like she solved a mystery, she suddenly gasped. You're seducing Charlie, aren't you? To escape your tough life, is that it? You shameless thing, especially since you're cousins. Now, without me saying much, Charlie pieced together her identity. His face darkened as he rebuked her. That's absurd. Becky's eyes burned, her expression a twisted frenzy. You're defending her? Did you know her family's bankrupt now? Her dad's delivering food, getting cursed daily, she gets hit too. And you defend this trash? Charlie furrowed his brow, shielding me. He spoke calmly. I think you're mistaken. Uncle was kicked out, but Lillian wasn't. She's attending a business school now. Grandpa has high hopes for her. As soon as he finished, Becky looked like she'd been struck by lightning. What did you say? That's impossible. Lillian should be delivering food with Dad, not in college. I was too tired to deal with her and grabbed Charlie, ready to leave. Becky blocked my way. How could Grandpa favor you? He's not even interested in me. How are you worthy? She looked me up and down, as if finding a reason. Is Grandpa a pedophile too? He likes them young. That old creep completely fooled me. If he'd just reached out sooner, I have plenty of young girls under me too. I slapped Becky hard. Talk bad about me all you want, but leave Grandpa out of this. That slap was for Grandpa. Becky tried to hit back. A middle-aged man stopped her. He had a mole above his right brow and a scar on his ear. It was Peter, the very man my mom wanted to impress in my past life. He held Becky tight, apologizing over and over to Charlie and me. Sorry, she has some mental issues. It's my fault, truly. Didn't mean to offend the Nolans. So, Becky's so-called rich and powerful boyfriend was Peter all along. That's just sad. She thinks clinging to power means every girl must sell herself to get a piece of it. I shook my head and said, keep your woman in line, Mr. Fong. Peter nodded repeatedly. But in his arms, Becky kept struggling. He's my grandpa too. Get it straight. He's my grandpa. Peter slapped her again, barking, shut up. Nolan only has 2 kids. Don't claim relations when you're just a seller. With a guilty glance at Charlie and me, he dragged Becky away. That day at the auction, I managed to snag one of Grandpa's favorite landscape paintings. Though my mood was far from up. Don't get me wrong. Becky got exactly what she deserves. I'm not upset for her. I was just thinking about how many more young girls might be in Mom's villa, and how many clients like Peter there might be. Maybe it was time I did something about it. At Grandpa's birthday celebration, the place was jam-packed. Charlie and I handed him the landscape painting, and Grandpa was thrilled. He proudly introduced us to all his closest friends. A stream of titles and names went by, but only one hit like a bolt. Mike. I remember that name. In a past life, he popped up countless times in Peter's angry rants. Mike, who came from a military background, was all about principles and had no patience for nonsense. He used to be Peter's boss, but when Peter got caught taking bribes, Mike fired him. Peter left the company and started his own business, snatching away quite a few clients from his old employer. Because of that, they basically became enemies. Now, it seems they're both gunning for the same government contract, and it's a crucial time in the project. Thinking about this, I raised my glass and toasted Mike. So you're the chairman of the Star, huh? I just heard about your company a few days ago. Mike chuckled. Oh, where from? I smiled. Speaking slowly, I ran into Uncle Peter at an auction the other day. Hearing Peter's name, Mike's expression darkened a bit. I acted like I didn't notice and kept on. It's funny, this is the third time I've bumped into Uncle Peter this month. The first 2 times, he seemed to be having drinks with Jessica. Jessica is my mom. Since she divorced my dad, she had some work done and changed her name. No one in town knows her history anymore. She's someone completely new. Over the years, she built a business from scratch through online streaming, growing it into a sizable venture. She's now a popular female entrepreneur. Outsiders see her as a self-made success story, but insiders know her so-called company is just a sleazy front for shady dealings. The moment the names Jessica and Peter were linked, Mike seemed to catch on immediately. You said, Jessica? He asked. I replied innocently. Yeah, that lady's really pretty, and so are the girls around her. But the uncle sitting with them looked familiar, like I've seen him on TV. Mike's eyes lit up. He quickly filled his glass, clinked it with mine, and drained it in one go. Lillian, your grandpa was right. You really are a lucky star. I didn't know what using a borrowed knife to kill meant. Or hitting a bull with a whip that hasn't hit it yet. I just knew that one day, while scrolling through my phone, I discovered that mom's company had shut down and she was in custody. The PR managers residing in her villa all ended up in the detention center too. Law enforcement shared some info with reporters. They mentioned receiving reports about corruption and scandalous deals, took it seriously, launched an investigation, and gathered solid evidence. Later, once the court ruled, they'd put those involved behind bars. In the news report, the detainees' faces were blurred out, but I could still recognize the man with the ugly birthmark. It was Peter. And the woman fleeing in his arms was Becky. Switching to finance news, the headlines cheered Bastar's rising stock price, which went up thanks to securing a big government contract, boosting investor confidence. After folding up the paper, my housekeeper brought me a gift. It was a birthday present from Uncle Mike for my 21st birthday, a translucent jade pendant. He didn't say anything or leave a note, but I knew why the gift was so valuable. I closed the box and tucked it in my closet. Just like my other glittering pieces of jewelry, it was beautiful but not what I was chasing anymore. Every bit of beauty comes with a price. Before I give my own work, talent, and effort in exchange, I don't deserve to wear them. Months later, the scandalous case that shook the nation reached its verdict. Masterminds Jessica and Becky faced heavy penalties for exploiting young girls. On a random afternoon, I received a call from the detention center. They said my sister wanted to see me. Outside the center, I ran into my dad. I thought he came to see my sister too. Turned out, he was delivering food nearby. Spotting me, he shamelessly approached. Lillian, can you put in a good word for me with Grandpa? Blood's thicker than water. Can you bear to see your dad suffer? Charlie tried to block him, but I stopped him. I looked calmly at this worn-out man and said, you deserve it. Grandpa had high hopes, guiding him every step, yet he mismanaged everything with drinking, gambling, and women. I remember one day as a kid, coming home from school. His bedroom door was open, with naked people inside. Whether drunk or high, one man tried grabbing me inside. My dad just sat there laughing, not stopping him. I was only 7 then. If the housekeeper hadn't saved me, I shudder to think what might have happened. Now, looking at my pitiful dad, I can't find a trace of his past charm. Maybe this is destiny's way of being fair. If you think you're invincible, destiny puts you right where you belong. I turned and left my dad's pleading behind, only marching forward, leaving childhood nightmares. Inside the prison visiting room, behind the glass, Becky stood in an orange vest and cuffs. Seeing me, she got overly excited, almost falling over trying to rush forward. I looked down at her. Calm down, sister. Becky asked. I heard you graduated from business school. I nodded. She continued, and you've joined Grandpa's company as a manager. I corrected her, just an intern. My staying depends on my skills. She went on, I heard Grandpa bought you an apartment downtown because he didn't want you commuting too far. I shrugged. I'm paying him rent for it. But it seemed like she didn't hear, just staying lost in her own world. Why? Why? This was supposed to be my life. If I had chosen Dad, all this would have been mine, a top schools, a mansion, the heir to the company. Lillian, you ruined everything for me. I looked at her with pity. Didn't you choose Dad? Becky snapped out of her frenzy, and after a moment pointed shakily at me. Did you also come back? I didn't answer, just said, both times, I wanted to save you. In my past life, Dad went bankrupt. Becky came to me, asking me to take her to Mom's big house. I refused because I didn't want her to suffer like me, but she hated me and poisoned me, ending my life. This time around, I met Peter and realized Mom might be up to the same tricks, so I called Becky, but she didn't see it as shameful. She was actually proud and helped Mom suppress other girls. A news report exposed it, saying Jessica was awful, selling her daughters for profit. But Becky was worse, aiding in the evil, coming up with tortures that were even crueler than Jessica's. Looking at the person crying behind the glass, I felt no sympathy. Becky, no matter what you choose, your ending won't be good. Because your intentions have always been wrong. You see people as tools to gain wealth and comfort, chasing a lazy dream your whole life. Even when tormented by old men, you thought it was more honorable than working. Grandpa never misjudged you. Like Dad, you're indulgent. Like Mom, you'll stop at nothing. Selfish and ruthless. Becky laughed and cried, almost losing it. No, I need another chance. I need to start over. She lunged at me, a twisted expression on her face. But she forgot there was a thick layer of glass between us. She slammed into the glass with a thud. Then the guards dragged her away. Her sharp cries echoed down the hall. Lillian, you won't die a good death. I just smiled. Not die a good death? Who really won't die well? When I heard Jessica had died, I had already rotated through different departments in the company. I heard Jessica happened to be in the same cell as a mom of a victim girl. That woman was a scam artist, tricking everyone just to make money for her daughter's medical treatment. But once jailed, her daughter was lured, tricked, imprisoned, and tormented by Jessica. One night, that mother found a way to end Jessica's life. They said Jessica died horribly. On the phone, a staffer asked if I wanted to claim her ashes. I said, no need. Discard them. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Really. I hung up the phone. I just kept working on my plan. During my rotations, sometimes I complained to Grandpa about the crazy overtime, saying it was wearing young people out. So Grandpa took it seriously, demanded efficiency, and put an end to useless overtime. He even fired the HR people and department heads who brought the overtime culture into the company. By then, Charlie had become the backbone of the company's divisions. He's always been sharp, and having Grandpa's influence from a young age, he knew the market inside out. Sometimes he faced problems being too far from the front lines, with info not flowing smoothly, so he'd come to me for help. I'm not a genius, just hid my true identity when I got hired. So I was able to mix with the front lines, hear gossip, eat popcorn over others' stories, and tell Charlie who the people were that employees hated but bosses loved. Then Charlie would swoop in and be the hero in everyone's eyes. On Friday, Charlie picked me up to go to Grandpa's for dinner. In the car, cheerful music played. Outside, a bright moon hung over the river. Out of nowhere, Charlie said, when I was a kid, I thought you were no different from your mom. I teased, you alright, insulting me like that? Charlie laughed too, a soft smile on his lips. Yeah. Then I realized something was off. You're more like Grandma. Grandma, who stood by Grandpa, helped start the company from scratch, holding up half the sky as a co-founder. I accepted the compliment guiltily, then said, actually, I've always wanted to thank you. I often say it's my hard work, diligence, and smarts that caught Grandpa's eye, that he gave me opportunities. But it's not entirely true. On the path where I raced to shake off past nightmares, at the start, it was Charlie who lent me a hand. He suggested to Grandpa that I join him for lessons. So Grandpa's rustic study had a place for me. After my sincere thanks, Charlie smiled. A red light stopped us. He braked and flicked my forehead. You, Missy, we're family, no need to thank me. Plus, you might have forgotten, when Becky pushed me into the lake, you jumped in to save me. I was taken aback. That happened? Charlie glanced at me and earnestly added, though back then, you barely reached my waist and didn't really save me. In fact, made it worse, you still meant well. I laughed out loud. The night breeze was gentle. The moon shone bright. Schubert's piano melodies softly graced my fingertips. I heard Charlie's slow voice. So, Lillian, everything in this world is reaping what you sow. Instead of thanking me, thank yourself. Because you're a good person, even if you hadn't met me, Charlie, you'd meet someone else. I looked down, smiling softly. Oddly, tears welled up at the corners of my eyes. Once upon a time, I lived in a home full of manipulation and distance. Mom only cared about money, and Dad was into women. My sister was this sweet-looking girl who always played dirty tricks on me. Later, my mom took me away, and I thought I'd start a brand new life. But she used a cruel method that nearly destroyed my life. During those years of being trapped, every day a different man barged into my room. I didn't even dare to sleep because I was terrified of waking up to the face of another stranger. What I couldn't wrap my head around was that my mom was the one who handed me over like a gift. She was supposed to be the one who loved me the most. Mom, why did you do this? Mom, I'm your daughter. Countless whys tangled up, becoming the knife on my wrist, the sleeping pills I'd swallow, the despair of not even being able to die. But luckily, everything changed. Now, I have a serious yet loving grandpa around and an impressive, honorable brother. They care for me, watch over me, and support me as I grow freely. My bedroom's cozy and cute, surrounded by kittens, puppies, and the Financial Times. All that darkness, pain, and terrifying breathing is far away from me now. I wiped away my tears, turned to look outside the car window, and gazed at the big, bright moon. Charlie noticed but kindly didn't dig deeper, casually changing the topic. Grandpa secretly asked me what birthday gift to get you. I thought for a moment and said, don't buy anything. I just want his fried rice. Charlie laughed exaggeratedly. No way, Missy, you're that easy to please? I laughed. Yep, isn't his homemade meal enough? Someone's willing to make me happy. Someone's willing to cook for me. And I can stand in the sunlight, living clean and fearless. That is the best gift life has given me.